Hey,
Sorry, got experience. All right, Mr. Nathaniel Gillis, welcome back. You seem to be, a favorite on the show.
thank you.
You're just
Thank
someone
you.
that I honestly relate to with all your research, everything you're doing. You're someone that can think past, common boxes, the common paradigms that we already have, specifically like demonology, like you yourself were. Now you've
Mhm,
expanded towards that. You're not even a ufologist. You're even more beyond that, and you don't even relate the two in terms of them being equal, but rather
mhm.
as aliens and demons being masks of a singular phenomena. Is that right?
That's correct. Archetypes, to which the phenomenon itself, or the proto-intelligence, as I call it, can moderate human behavior. And so
Right.
we're not even sure these beings even exist. The evidence suggests sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but at least there's a portion of their materialization that is the byproducts of orbs.
Oh God. Okay. I was gonna. Okay. Hold that thought. Hold that thought. Hold that thought. I'm going to start it off on a little bit of a lighter note. What do you
Okay.
do in kind of your spare time when you're not fully invested in this research? Because I know it's got to be tough. So how do you balance it out? What do you do? What have hobbies do you have?
Uh, it's a good question. I um I like to watch football. I'm a big Ohio State Buckeye fan because I live in Ohio, and
Nice. Hey,
I
we're
like
rivals.
heck yeah. Well, there we go, right? Um, interview over. No, I'm just kidding. I'm a big Buckeye fan. I'm a big football fan in general, so I do follow the recruiting trail. Other than that, I like a good jazz album. I'm a big John Coltrane fan. I like Christian Scott, to be a little bit more modern, I guess, of an artist. Big foodie. I love good pizza. I love chicken wings. If I can get
Oh,
a
same.
get a
Yeah.
hold of some good ones, right? I'm a ranch
And
guy,
if you
I gotta tell
combine all
you.
three of them, it's great, right?
Absolutely, brother. Absolutely. It's oh my God, yeah, football, chicken wings,
And
pizza.
music.
Yeah, there we go, right? So other than that, I enjoy like one of my favorite authors. Like whenever I get too dark in the research, I always pick up a book by Abraham Joshua Heschel. He's a rabbi, and in my opinion, the most gifted writer on theology and specifically dealing with God I've ever found. He's incredible. And so I have a lot of his books behind me. I even have one that's autographed by him. So is A.J.
Very
Heschel, who's a big, big
nice.
proponent and a good friend of Martin Luther King Jr. So I like that. That's kind of my vibe and my tribe. And other than that, my friend, I'm a loner. I'm very much a loner. I go out by myself. I'm not a very, I can be social up to a point. Um, uh, but I tend to just walk alone. And obviously, with the kind of research I do and have been doing, it's kind of best for me to do that, specifically surrounding the hitchhiker or hijacker effect.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's a gift and a curse, my friend.
Oh, I laugh because I'm exactly the same way. Obviously you like to talk, you like to discuss these topics. It's not like you're antisocial. It's just like,
Hmm.
okay, well, these conversations aren't going to happen with everybody, and we're going to reach a point with some people. It's like it's going to stop, and it just gets. Sometimes you really need that. You really do need that to balance it out
Absolutely.
because you probably find like this research is heavy, right? It weighs you down quite a
Yeah.
bit. It's hard to
It
stay objective.
does. It does. Yeah, and I've experienced being stared back by it. And I
Right.
said this on a show yesterday where even researchers that I am extremely fond of, because of the nature of their work in them being experiencers themselves, I've kind of distanced myself from them because I don't want them to suffer from the hijacker effect on my part, which I've done shows like that where
Oh yeah.
I release a new data point or something, and next thing you know, I get an email from the host or even people that viewed the interview or the phenomenon just kind of moved through the channels and
Mm.
materialized in their homes. And so I'm very protective over that. And at the same time, though, I think that the information has to get out, and perhaps I am a medium of that to where I have to leverage myself, put myself on the line in order to educate the population about the darker aspects of the phenomenon. And at the end of the day, if I may get maybe 2 hours to myself a week, right? at a local
Mhm.
Buffalo Wild Wings or something,
Mhm.
it's worth it,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so I'm excited to talk to you again, my friend. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think you have to worry about the phenomena affecting us too much because I think a lot of your viewers are already experienced with it, and if anyone's new
Hmm.
to it, then they might actually start noticing in their life where was already
Yeah.
present to begin with. I think in everyone's life potentially it is present, but acting with different masks, like you talk about, right? But
Yeah,
we're kind of used
absolutely.
to feeling something's off, and we have to clean it, we have to extract it. Just but as you
Hmm.
say, it almost like it tests our belief in it, right?
Yep.
And I really want to talk about this. Actually, let's go back to the previous point where you mentioned the orbs
Hmm.
manifesting the phenomenon.
Yep.
Sometimes you say that it can appear like these crafts can appear as nuts and bolts. So
Hmm.
they actually appear, first of all, material, but second of all, as something that's not really real, not really actually
Correct.
functional in airspace, right?
Hmm.
Our own air force doesn't allow for such manufacturing because it's just not functional.
Hmm.
So why do you think they're doing that, and why do you think it's off like that? It's not even fully, let's say, practical or fully
Right.
believable to begin with.
Well, I think that's the byproduct of the learning matrix glitching in and out. I don't think that's like intentional. I think it
Oh,
literally,
okay,
right, it's trying to fix its form. And in addition to that, something that I'm introducing, at least to people that follow my research, is the observer effect being weaponized against the witnesses. To where, like early on in my research, I discovered a unique pathology, which is the phenomenon was seeking to be seen. And
yes,
so through the peripheral vision, it would kind of lean and look like a shadow figure until you locked your observation on it. And at that point, the phenomenon would incarnate, not just manifest, but incarnate as something. And so, quantum entanglement and the observer effect, I think it's incredible. But my point is that I have cases in my own career where multiple witnesses would witness one entity. They would see one entity,
okay,
but they would have a difficult time agreeing on what that entity looked like.
I see. Okay,
So what I'm suggesting here, which would explain what the question you asked earlier, is that through the act of what's called the observation or the observer effect, what's happening is that once the phenomenon seeks to be seen and is witnessed and seen, what we as a species are doing are collapsing various forms of the same entity.
potential. Hmm. Hmm. But wouldn't
And
that
so,
affect its sorry to interrupt, wouldn't that
okay,
affect its overall agenda of incarnating as a specific form if it keeps getting different perspectives from each observer?
um, it would just be the archetypes, and I think that's what's happened throughout history,
Oh,
where
I
you
see. It doesn't matter which archetype it incarnates as, just as long as it manifests. Okay. Gotcha.
there we go, and I think that kind of solves the mystery over the confusion here. The incubi accounts literally where the phenomenon was propagating certain fallacies, and not just that, but directly coordinating even today with Hollywood, where they push certain agendas, and the phenomenon uses that to incarnate. And so, right, you had the missing fetus syndrome. Well, you would have two witnesses throughout history. Well, to one witness says, "Oh yeah, that's an incubus hybrid," and the other witness says, "No, the entity that took my fetus." Or the other experience, right? That was an alien. It's the same pathologies, and so I think that that's what's occurring is that the phenomenon itself seeks to be seen, and once it is seen, it leans upon the archetypes we're creating through the observer effect. Boom, I'm this now. It's just like the case study I've been working on now with a gentleman, and it's going to be verbose for people that are going to be watching my interviews. It's okay because,
It's fine.
I'm doing the same research I did yesterday. Nothing's changed, right? um,
We just need more details.
there we go, right? And so the phenomenon was taking, or entities were taking his mother, but when the phenomenon would incarnate in his room, there would be different visual effects. Like one time, it would just be this plasma field with orbs that were popping off, hovering directly over his mother as she slept. Yet when it actually hovered over top of her, the mother came out the next day, with sigils from head to toe. But what she saw or thought she witnessed were alien grays.
Ah, I see.
So yeah, so I do believe, and even now, like with Skywatcher and the CE5 movement, they're realizing that what they're witnessing with the naked eye is completely different than what they're capturing on camera.
Oh, right, right, exactly.
Why? And so there is a measure of the phenomenon that seeks to be seen so it can incarnate an archetype. And this is the problem. I become a witness. Well, what are you witnessing? Because by the time we lay eyes on it, it uses us again to structure the archetype it's incarnating as.
Hmm.
And so this is the biggest issue. It's almost as if we in our brains, as a species, our brains are very limited. And by the time we process what we're actually seeing, it's not it at all. It's the phenomenon
Definitely.
constructing an image. And
You know what that
so
sorry, you know what that reminds
what's
me of?
that? What's
It's
that?
the when Adam starts naming the animals in
Hmm.
the world essentially. He gives everything names, right? That he's being
Yes.
used to give everything form, to give everything
There we
manifestation.
go. There we go. We are the canvas, right, upon which they paint their reality. And I don't want to, I'm not like suggesting that we're creating the phenomenon. You know, there are researchers in the field that
Right.
will suggest that with ease, right? They want to
Yep.
say that if you were punished by them or tortured by them, that's a manifestation of your
Hmm.
subconscious. I think what they're
Carl
confusing is
Jung.
the, you know, there's others, absolutely,
Mhm.
right? And they kind of,
Unconscious.
yeah. They go into Jungian philosophy to justify violence.
Mm,
And it's just, I believe it's, I mean, on its face, it's just laughable because I mean, yeah, I'm not going to tell somebody that was assaulted by these beings that's their fault. I'm not into
yeah,
victim blaming.
yeah, I agree.
And, you know, if they didn't know it was their subconscious, then how would I?
Hmm. Hmm. I think he
Very,
does have a point in the fact that
yep.
our unconscious is being used to give it form, right?
There we
So
go.
it's
That's
pulling out elements of our subconscious
right.
for sure.
And that is the archetype. And I think sometimes they get that confused.
Yes.
And right. So there's a contrast there.
Mm,
And that's my position right now. And I reserve the right to change it, but the evidence does suggest that heavily. You
same.
know, it's pattern confirming to where, yes, you know, specifically in incubi literature, it's takes on the form, even the long codex of the Apocrypha of John, where they it says they took on the form of the husband. How? And it was only by virtue of observation.
Right. Right.
And so it's thousands of years ago this was written. So it's not that we are authoring its response to us. No, right? I think again that we are co-creators of the archetype that manifests. The proto-intelligence that wears that mask operates on its own belief systems, its own laws, if there are any that it follows. And so, and we've seen that where the archetype itself is deconstructed in real time. This blew my mind when I realized it, to
That's
where
all. Yeah.
the learning matrix the phenomenon employs can only hold form for a certain amount of time before the physiognomy, the literally the mask, the archetype starts to shift, and the experiencer realizes it has triggered obviously the observer effect, but number one, but number two, it can only hold shape for a certain amount of time. And it's fascinating to me.
Kind of like the nature of this reality, if you think about it,
Yep.
where it's like if you stop creating these beliefs in your brain that, hey, this is an actual chair, and you keep
Yep.
affirming the fact that it's actually not there. I don't know if you talked to Heidi Mikowski um,
Hmm.
recently or anything, but he gives an example where he did that thought experiment and he
Hmm.
started being able to see through walls. He said, you know, he
Yeah.
had to stop because reality was actively deconstructing in front of him.
It's an old David Berlinski point. He's a brilliant man. He's a creationist. He's a secular Jew, but he does believe that we are designed by something. And in one of his lectures, he talks about, you know, I can understand the physics behind, right, a chair being a chair. But what is telling the chair to act like a chair? It's kind of your point, right? What's holding it
Mhm,
together?
mhm.
And so that's what I believe is happening to a certain extent, but I'm not going to commit to that thought to the point where I'm going to blame victims or hybrid mothers for being assaulted. But you
Oh, yeah.
understand what I'm saying.
Oh,
They're
100%.
confusing the two
Yes, of course.
and pushing it in so many interviews, and like anybody that questions it, oh well, they're stupid and they're illiterate. And it's like, no, I think that we know a little bit more about the phenomenology. And
Which
yeah,
sorry to cut you
yeah.
off, which
No, again.
reveals the larger there's some sort of larger agenda and objective, even though it is seemingly simulation and
Yeah.
simulatory. Uh, you
Mhm.
know, there's it's not real. There still seems to be some objective behind whatever it's doing.
Yes, yes, there's something more real,
Exactly.
right? And we've seen that in NDE research, but the phenomenology behind it is important. If people do not have a firm foundation of esotericism specifically, they won't understand this. They will come around thinking, well, yeah, you just projected that. I read a little booklet on Jungian philosophy. Hey, look, you're responsible for your own pregnancy. Think about what I just said. That's ludicrous, my friend. And again, I think it's because they misunderstand the archetypology behind the phenomenon. And and forgive me if I was a little bit that wasn't pointed towards you, by the way. Obviously, I was pointed towards
No,
people
no,
out
no,
there,
no.
which
I
is
completely
yeah.
understand.
Um, yeah,
I just did
so
a video on that kind of idea
like
recently.
yeah, I come away thinking that there is some kind of simulation present, and it's possible that whatever we're dealing with on the other side has hacked the simulation, and they literally focus their knowledge
Hmm.
on the exterior reality. They focus that knowledge upon grooming others within the simulation.
Right. Okay. Great transition. So let's get into that idea. Now,
Hmm.
who is on this other side? Let's say, first of all, from here to the astral, and then maybe from the astral
Hmm.
beyond. Is it just these disincarnate spirits, beings, formerly people, or is there something behind them as well?
I think it's kind of a combination of both. I don't think we really know how to articulate what a ghost is yet.
Yeah.
And if the only thing in apparitional theory we have witnessed to date are projections of an orb or orbs, then that in and of itself may be a lie, right? Again, we're getting all of our hauntology through, orbs, right? And thinking, and this is again is my foundational work of preternatural epiphenomenal philosophy, where we're looking at the phenomenon, not realizing that it's a secondary consequence of another intelligence. It's the archetype interacting with us through what I call interface events. And
Yeah.
so it's the individual that jumps into a pool, and parapsychology is measuring the waves. We're measuring the archetypes. We're
We're
literally constructing entire fields
yes.
around entities that may or may not exist. They could literally be the phenomenon constructing a mask in our presence. Does it make sense? And then
Yeah.
we're teaching classes on it, thinking that's what we're looking at. It's like,
Yeah. Hmm.
no.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
We're blaming the pool for the waves rather than the actual
absolutely.
person that jumped in, of course. Uh,
Absolutely.
so how if it's these people, these beings on the other side, let's say, right? There's
Hmm.
some this incarnate beings. Um, you mentioned you have some experience with the rabbi and maybe even Jewish mysticism. Is that correct?
Hmm. Hmm.
There's pretty
Yes.
research into Kabbalah, let's say. Do you think there's a connection between, like you've mentioned before, sorcerers and sorcery and magic
Hmm.
happening behind the scenes, inducing the phenomenon, especially from the other side?
Yes. Necronetics teaches that earthborn rituals are not us saying their name. It's them saying ours and us responding accordingly.
With their names?
Yes. It's the conjuring of us to conjure them. It's
Yeah.
CE5 when it seeks to be seen. It's the thought that leads the observer effect out into the cosmology of stars and says, construct an archetype for me.
Oh, I see.
And this is what's crazy again is the Skywatcher effect is proving this. CE5 is proving literally this theory, where by the time we lock eyes on it, yeah, you're smiling. Where by the time, right? If I hope you're smiling for a good reason, by the way, but yeah, once we observe it, it has functionally changed its appearance.
Yes.
So it seeks to be seen.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
This is Steve Merritt, one of the, oh my God, it's the poltergeist effect. I want to throw papers in the air. Okay,
Mhm.
what happened when you actually laid eyes on it and you started paying attention to it? What we've noticed specifically in parapsychology is that the pathology mutates. It's not really a poltergeist. It was trying to incarnate. And even when we started to measure its abilities, they would grow. Why? Because it was being measured.
Right. Mhm.
And once we started to quantify it, the more power it then had. And so, yeah, it was a poltergeist, right? So we see the evolution of the archetypes, but what we're really looking at is the proto-intelligence and hoping, intending to incarnate and using human consciousness in order to do it. Now, throughout history, again, not to be verbose here, but we've made that mistake where the phenomenon seeks to be seen and it puts the fault in the CE5 practitioner. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. What? I'm going to go outside, step, and we've seen it over and over again. And when they go outside, something connects to them and they're looking in a certain direction. Where are you at? Well, where does the phenomenon wish to incarnate the archetype? Oh, it's there. And then boom, it materializes. And again, what they're seeing with their naked eye isn't what they're recording on camera. And so it's quite literally reality constructing itself within our presence and then holding its shape. And what I'm afraid of is that is the way it has diversified its identity literally in our eyes.
Mhm. So curiosity pretty much killed the cat with that aspect, but hopefully
Yes.
satisfaction brings it back. Um, Now these practitioners, right? And I'm sure you've heard of Freemasonry, right?
Mhm.
Now they employ a lot of the same similar magic, and if you really look into it, it's a lot of it is Jewish mysticism. If you trace that
Yep.
back, Kabbalah, it goes back to the Babylonian age. Oh, and this is the point I want. That's just what I was smiling about. That made me think of astrology. You know how they say, "Oh, well, we looked up in the sky and we traced the constellations and we gave it, this is Leo, this is Aries."
Right.
Well, to your point, the sky is looking at us and telling us which dots to connect and saying this is my form,
Absolutely.
giving me
100%.
the name.
100%.
Right.
Yep. Yep. It's conjuring us to conjure them. And
Yeah.
the really, I guess, concerning aspect about all of this is that obviously, at least necrogenetics, it's not what we're seeing. So we don't really know what's incarnating, my friend.
Right.
We just, right? And so it's like, okay, if you were to take a CE5 practitioner and say, okay, we have cameras out there. What did you see? Oh, I saw this incarnate. Okay, fine. What's this on camera? Well, that also incarnated with it. Which of them is entering our reality?
Mhm, mhm. Right,
Or
because
both of them?
you you've noticed that in witness accounts, it's usually if they're, observant enough, it's usually there's an orb behind whatever image
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
manifesting.
absolutely. It's projecting it.
It's projecting it, yeah.
Yeah. And so even the experiential research, oh my God, my friend, even as we measure it, we're noticing an evolution of what we're measuring. Once it's observed, once we record it, it seems to be in the evolution of incarnation that we're witnessing. And
Mhm,
to that extent, I think that we are obviously being manipulated. You know, getting back to some of the connections the phenomenon makes with us, like I said, it begins with the thought. And I just read a case study the other day where the CE5 practitioners, one specifically walks out, she was a woman, walks out, and the phenomenon latches onto her consciousness.
mhm,
And she couldn't get rid of it.
mhm,
And she's telling the other people with her, it's locked onto me. I was trying to lock onto it, but now it's locked onto me. I would suggest that in some cases, the phenomenon is turning our eyes towards its direction,
mhm, mhm.
right? It's disturbing.
Because you mentioned that they're or it is probably looking for someone that's compatible, right? The
Yes.
actual phenomenon or its manifestation of it, like I don't think you mentioned some sort of piece of metal would only
Hmm.
um hold true, would only hold its form in the hands of someone that's actually worthy. Otherwise, it would
Yes.
disintegrate.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely. Yeah,
why?
disintegrating nothingness.
What who
That's Richard
why and
Benrick.
who are they looking for? What is the purpose of that?
I think that there, again, I think that there are practitioners alive on the earth today that are being seeded with this technology, and that these practitioners have long been initiates into these mystery schools, and that because of the nature of their research, they are now possessed with the species within.
Mm,
And so, once again, the phenomenon's conjuring us to conjure it. We're thinking, here you go. I'm giving you this medal. The phenomenon's thinking, yeah, but that's just an avatar for the consciousness we've placed in that body. And so we're thinking it's us that the phenomenon's trying to connect to in these cases. It's not, it's them. And so it's another way, it's like a Trojan horse, at least from
oh,
John
100%.
Keel's perspective.
But it's almost like, because even let's say with the way this universe works, I've
Mhm.
at least noticed that it it kind of reveals these things to you in steps. And with the New Age movement, it kind of tells everyone that they're special. Oh, you're so
Mhm.
special. You're in this, new thought system, belief system. It's because you're awake. You're really cool. You're just an
Mhm.
amazing person. But even through all of them, it seems like they're still filtering. It's like they're still choosing some people that maybe are the most willing to
Yeah.
give themselves, I guess. 'Cause it goes back to selling your
Yeah.
soul to the devil, in my opinion. Where if you're the most
Or
willing to sell
selling someone else's. Yeah. A
that
lot of
too, yeah.
this, even some of the feudal magic I've been researching in Montague Summers' work is I've long believed that they're creating hybrids, I believe 100% for sorcery. It's not just, their biological avatars in which to possess, that
Yeah.
they've learned that there are certain rituals they can create with what they're hatching. But yeah, these are practitioners and they're being molded and groomed by the phenomenon. And the pathology shows that, right? And I try to stress this to people when I do interviews that we're not talking about practitioners that are doing podcasts, right? They're not writing books. These are people that have done their best to exist in the shadows, never to
Exactly.
talk about it, right? That's how they've existed for so long.
Mhm.
And even in ufology, which I can't really go into in depth, unfortunately, at least not yet, but even ufologists have alters. People like to think that George Adamski and Albert Bender and all these people were the only ones, but they weren't. And so what I've seen now is that much of our technology is the byproduct, or at least even the technology we're not even witnessing here out in the public. It's the byproduct of conjuring. And people want to act like, well, it's just an altar. It's not just an altar. Things die on altars. That's what they've always been.
Mhm.
In biblical antiquity, even in surrounding populations and cities, Syria and the like, where they were literally constructing their altars around the phenomenon, where the phenomenon was. And the phenomenon had a strict diet. This is
Mm.
what I require. This is what I want. And here's how we know it's desiring the same thing from our species. It's because the same secretions, the same fetuses the phenomenon was harvesting in antiquity. It's doing it now in ufology and the UFO abduction phenomenon. Still taking over, still taking semen, still taking hybrid babies.
Mhm.
And now what I'm doing is making a connection between all of the hybridism and sigilization being present in the same cases. Dare I say, and after all of that takes place, the phenomenon starts to apport money to them,
Mhm.
just dropping out of the sky in their homes.
Really?
Absolutely. And so,
So what you're saying is that these mystery schools essentially are not gone, right? And
oh, they're
even
here.
the whole idea of life and this world being a school, a mystery school, maybe
Mhm.
there's some sort of initiation factor happening not only with these movements like C5, New
Right.
Age, Scientology, whatever, but this whole simulation and life in general maybe is existing as sort of initiation. But
Mhm.
for what? What do they need? They need us to commandeer their lives, their phenomena, continue it.
Yeah, well, it sets us up in the same worldview as our ancestors had. It's like there's us, and then there's another species that's performing ritual magic, and then there's another species that they're pulling influence from. And
Hmm.
that's why I've long had an argument against these beings, I guess, these beings being demonic. The grammar is awful, I admit. And, especially in the church circles, which I've been recently doing shows on, they're really just podcasts and everything, where, these are all devils and demons. And it's like, well, okay, well, can a demon produce sperm? Well, angels took on the form of men. And again, here's the logic. Well, are you suggesting that they are men?
Or they just took on the form of men.
They took on
Right.
the form of a man. So it's like,
Right.
well, it has to be thought out deeper than that because you start really getting muddy. And so then it's like, well, no, I'm not suggesting they were men. It's like, well, I'll tell you what does suggest they were men. Sperm. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
We have a winner here, and that's just it's a difficult conversation to have because it starts to get into angelology and demonology and what's actually going on. Um, but
Well, to
third
your
one,
point, to add to your point, I mean, there's plenty of counts, especially near death experiences, where people go into the astral and they're like,
yeah,
well, this is just like Earth. We have cities, we have
yeah,
money, we have to work, we're in a hierarchical society, we can't think for ourselves. What's going on here? Why is there another simulation? And to
mm,
the idea that the phenomena deteriorates over time, we'll look at all our bodies, even the astral body.
mhm.
In my opinion, wherever there's space, time, a body, it's not real. It's something. It's you've
Something, yeah,
created some sort of limitations, some paradigms, and said these are the modalities you must follow in this construct.
absolutely, yes. These are rules that
Rules.
the proto-intelligence honors. And some of the data I've been collecting as of late, which is that there's a reason Sinistrari, Montague, Summers believe that the secretions they were collecting were coming from either corpses or recently deceased men. I'm leaning towards the fact that at least the rituals I've discovered in grimoires where the sigilization was present with secretion. Even in Osman Spar, where he talks about sigilization occurring at the moment of conception, where the practitioner, as soon as he inseminates, there is a secondary response to that insemination, and that would be sigilization.
Oh, I see.
So now
So maybe
we
that's
enter
their
a whole,
first form of manifestation, the sigil. So
it's
every time you
evolution.
actually look at the freaking sigil symbol, you're extracting that phenomena into your own. You're being invaded by a
Absolutely.
species.
Absolutely, my friend. And the combination of the sigil and the secretions in the body at the same time, um, very like truly disturbing stuff. And another problem that I'm running into here lately is how the phenomenon, the proto-intelligence, is honoring the evolution of practitioners. Like Austin Osman Spar talks about, like in sigilization and in insemination, at the moment that happens, that the body will absorb, activate, and what is it, expel the sigils.
Oh, I see. Hmm.
And so, there are cases, one of which I'm working on.
So people can
Uh,
have these sigils dormant within them and not know it.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Oh, Sinistrari he was finding cases where they were hidden underneath the eyelids of the experiencer.
Oh my god, that's that's terrorizing.
Yeah, the implications. Yeah. And honestly, most people that do this research would lose their mind because it's literally pushing you to stare into the abyss and come back hoping that you survive long enough to be able to communicate what you saw.
Exactly.
But, you know, so with respect to the sigilization, yes, they were underneath the eyelids of the experiencer. So every time she closed her eyes,
Oh wow. Mm.
yeah,
Oh, and that reminds me of people that go into meditation or people that
yes,
have
yes.
close their eyes before going to sleep at night and they start seeing these things. Like there's
Oh,
something there. What am I
yes,
seeing?
the sigils were hidden in their own darkness.
In their own darkness, exactly.
Every time they went to sleep, they didn't realize it, but their eyes were staring into the energetic signature of a practitioner they didn't even know existed.
Of course. And that again, like we said, is to extract the energy to gain that influence.
To create, yeah,
Um,
to create a connection, and people just act like, well, these are, and again, dream demons. Okay, we'll go with that. You know
right.
what I mean? I mean, even though it's an iceberg effect, there's something profound going on that when researchers don't do good research, right, they come away thinking, yeah, that's just a dream demon. That's sleep paralysis. Okay, yeah, it's those are evolutions, by the way, of materialization. There's not just okay, there's dream demons, and then there's, you know what I mean, nightmares. No,
Mm,
no, that is a ritual. And
mhm,
I'm starting to realize that once we're getting these experiencers into memory regression and we start to access the archive of forgotten data within the experience, you start to see that it wasn't just a dream demon,
exactly.
right? It wasn't just a
Right.
nightmare, that was literally the only thing they could remember out of the ritual.
Hmm. So these things, not only are they real, like they're actually happening, but they're fragments of something that else that's something bigger that's
Yes,
happened. And that's
much
why I tell
larger.
people all the time, hey, you have to pay attention to your dreams. Do not just go having sex with
Hmm.
that person in your dream. That's not
Right.
even probably that person or even a fragment of that person. Um,
Yep.
you have to be conscious both in this dream and the next dream and wherever
Hmm.
other dreams you can, take part of, because something is using you, and you
Yep.
just kind of going along for the ride is giving consent to that phenomena.
Yes, yes. And not informed consent either. It's literally the
Exactly.
manipulation
It's a
of our
manipulation.
entire species. Um, yeah, and I'm starting to lean towards this too, where like I was talking to an individual who just gave me his case study. He's like, you know what, I'm gonna give you my account and see what you think about it. Because I read a lot, and so sometimes I read in restaurants. I'm kind of have my own watering hole, so I'll just go there and read. Anyways, this guy's like, listen, I need to talk to you about something. I said, okay. He's like, he said, when I was a kid, he said I was left alone at the house. My parents went out to eat. He's like, it was my first time being old enough to where I didn't have to have a babysitter. He's like, but he said it was dusk, I think it was. And he said, I'm looking outside my house. He said, now there was a part of the road where there was no trees, there were no lights, right? And then that's what it was. There were no trees, but there were lights.
Hmm.
And then he said, and then there were trees. And he's like, so it would be light, 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 and then complete darkness in the trees and everything. And he said, so Nathaniel, he says, I promise you, he said, I've never told this story because it sounds crazy. He said, but I saw a shadow figure in the shape of a wolf man walking on two legs.
I believe it.
He said it walked out, and this is incredible.
Kind of like hunched over, like a
Yes. Oh, no, it was standing up.
it's
This will
standing
blow
up,
your
right?
mind. Standing up. He said it was walking on two legs and it looked around, looked at me, noticed me, and then he said as he started to get out into the light, it was a deer.
Wow.
Right. And he's like, "Well, what do you do with that?" And again, I'm leaning towards shadow people or shadow entities being partially manifested.
Wow. So you can't even trust, the real thing you think is a deer or squirrel that's right outside your house
Phenomenon hiding in plain sight.
in plain
Now,
sight.
we've
Yeah.
seen this, right? Once it realized it was observed, here's the archetype.
Hmm. Boom.
Now, right? And it's fascinating to me because I mean, and I think that our government knows this. I mean, if Nathaniel Gillis knows it, like if we're talking about this, right?
Yes.
They're
Yes. Yes.
they're way beyond us, and so a lot of this is open sourced. Um, but yes, the phenomenon hides in plain sight, and this gets into aggressive mimicry, where again, if these CE5 experiencers are thinking they're witnessing one thing, and in fact, what's being documented and observed, or recorded rather, is something completely different, then that means that we have witnessed the phenomenon in real time,
Hmm.
but it was hiding in plain sight.
Hmm.
Like I have a friend of mine who, him like years ago, about a decade ago, him and his wife were traveling through Tennessee on vacation, and they passed by this beautiful lake. The light was reflecting off the lake. It was picturesque. And so they both stop, they whip out their phones, take a picture. To look, when they looked at the picture, there was a metallic silver object hovering over the lake.
Yeah. Wow.
Never saw it with their eyes. So dare I say that as the phenomenon is employing the observer effect, triggering within us, literally to create an archetype, it's doing that also to hide in plain sight. Are
Yeah.
you
So
looking
that
at the
is.
sky? Right? Yes. Okay, then I'm going to be the sky.
So it's always near us. You can't essentially escape it.
I think, yes, I think that that is the most, perhaps the most uncomfortable part
Yeah.
of what our government is researching, right? Where it's not just that we're creating reality, mm, we are co-creators of the reality, and that whatever we're dealing with seeks to be seen. This gets back into the Collins Elite research where belief creates. Observing the phenomenon changes the phenomenon we are observing. And so, if we're dealing with an intelligence that seeds us by being seen by us, then no wonder the Collins elite said, just don't believe in them.
Mhm. Yeah, it's fair.
Very weird stuff. Very deep, but strange.
So it does seem that memory also plays
Yeah.
a huge well, it plays a huge role in this whole phenomenon because it's pulling from our memory, but also
Mhm.
seems to be extracting memory from us.
Yeah.
Going
Mhm.
back to your Steven example, right? There's memory in that. It's like a USB drive, right?
Right.
Extracting the data. Blood is very prevalent in rituals, right? And
Hmm.
then the whole idea of them wiping your memories upon reincarnation, or rather right after death, if you know,
Yeah.
as they say, go into the white light. Why do you think that's so necessary? Memory tied into emotions
Hmm.
being driven by thoughts, all of them being connected.
I think that what we're going to learn is that memory creates matter,
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
and that
Memory's
oh,
tied to
this
matter.
is
Yeah.
absolutely yes. And so this is some of the reading I was doing earlier today, where, and this again is another bedrock of necronetics, where through necromancy, especially in witch literature, that they would heal by virtue of being laid hands on by dead people.
Wow.
Very sinister stuff.
Huh.
And it would be in the simulation hypothesis, it would be using the avatar of someone who once was in this simulation to affect the simulation itself.
Mm.
That's one way of looking at it. But yeah, so some of this stuff is dark, but and sometimes honestly, I really have to take a step back and have to look at it a different way. I can't afford to be afraid of this. I can't afford to be terrorized by it. I have to look at it
Yeah.
through a purely sometimes, and I'm not a scientist, but even, looking at it through a purely scientific lens, because anything beyond that starts to get out of control, and I don't know, or at least don't want to know, right? How they can adjust me. I just kind of want to be like, oh, I'm immune to it. I didn't see that, right? But mentally, I'm like, dude, that was nuts.
Well, that's
Right?
the same approach I'm taking with these synchronicities, right? Like,
Yeah.
the more I give it significance, the more it manifests. But then I started not giving it significance. I'm like, yeah, whatever. And then it stopped manifesting. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
it's not actually real. It's not actually
Yeah.
significant. I stopped noticing it. The moment I give it energy again, okay. But then that also again opens the portal for being manipulated, for being sent
There
messages
we go.
and being, maybe pulled down the line with some true aspects, like, oh, this is true, what you thought was significant is true, and now we're going to send you what you think is true, and then the opposite happening, right?
Yeah.
It's going to bleed you down this path and nothing happens, or something worse
So
happens.
you're right. You're right, brother. So some of the work that my friend Steve Mera did in his parapsychology cases is absolutely fascinating. He was having cases where, and by the way, I'm going to be doing a show with him on his new podcast here in May,
Awesome.
which is going to be incredible. Um, but where the phenomenon, especially in like poltergeist cases, something would fall off a shelf, but it would shake the house. They would go back, they'd knock the same thing off the shelf, and the audio, right? You would barely hear it,
Mm.
but the phenomenon would amplify the sound, get your
Yeah.
attention. right? And so a lot of this does, again, bridge the gap between the phenomenon manifesting and incarnating, where the manifestation is sometimes liminal, right? Where it's softer. And then when you start to observe it, then it compounds and manifests more, like a pathogen. And we would call that, at least some circles, the hitchhiker, the hijacker effect. But yeah, you would literally see or experience the phenomenon accentualizing, right?
Yeah.
Amplifying itself.
Hmm.
Oh, come here, come here, come here, come here. There's
Come up,
something over
come
here you
close.
need to look
Yeah.
at. And
Exactly.
then the observation effect takes place. And then the phenomenon incarnates. Manifestation first, knock on the door. Incarnation second, opening it, making eye contact. So this is what I think is happening. And uh, I mean, obviously it does make me question reality and how much we create it. But that's not me saying that we create what they're doing to us. This is not a psychosomatic event.
Hmm.
These sigils are, some of them are gender specific. They are literally Theban or some kind of reference to medieval sorcery. Um, the other cases I have where it's Egyptian hieroglyphs coming through the skin to the surface, these aren't psychosomatic. Something is writing into these individuals. They are being acted upon.
Hmm. They're being
And yeah,
initiated.
initiated.
Yeah.
Or I think that that's true, but also performed upon in rituals.
Used for the actual ritual
Oh, of
themselves.
course.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Agreed. Agreed. Well, I mean, that's what they do with the initial initiates into these
Yeah.
mystical. Don't they haze them? They put them through the ritual. They make them the actual
Yeah.
object of the ritual first. Until
They be
then,
yes.
they become vampiric, and then they need to do the same.
Right. And by virtue of peeling their souls out of their bodies, they become self-seeing to where at first the experiencer thinks they're looking at a UFO or a UAP flying in the sky, and then they're out of their body, and now they are the UAP flying in the
Yeah,
sky.
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Right. They become self-seeing.
Yeah.
Matthew Roberts is a quote unquote whistleblower, but he observed the gimbal UAP, and it's like, again, the difference between a manifestation and incarnation. I think that we start to see the mask of the incarnation, but it's almost as if yeah, it's the UFO that, oh, okay, yeah, it's just a UFO, but the intentions come with the mask. That's what's crazy. And so, yeah, it hides itself, its identity, but its pathology still in the archetypes and the interfaces it uses. So back to Matthew Roberts, he sees the UAP. Oh, that's great. That's fascinating. Wild stuff. He goes back home. A voice starts talking to him, right? It
Yep.
starts pointing him back to occult magic, back to the thing is the Kabbalion and different esoteric books. And not only that, but he's visited by a succubus entity.
Hmm. And then starts pulling for him. That's exactly what
Yes,
happened to my brother. He was a
really.
lot younger at the time. We were watching actually a C5 documentary on Netflix, and I was deep into New Age at the time, so I kind of made him watch
Mhm.
it with me. And then he's like, "Listen, uh, during that movie, I started hearing these voices, and they started communicating with me. They're like, 'Don't be scared.'" I'm like,
There
"Just
we
from
go.
this movie, from here?" I'm like, "Yeah, don't be scared." But I didn't know anything about it at the time. But like that, now that I think back on it, I'm like, "Wow, that
We've
was
seen that.
an infiltration just from the
Of
movie."
course. Absolutely. It's yeah,
Document.
so I mean we've heard that in the Ammon case, right? Where this is in Gary, Indiana, with Father Michael Magino, or Magino is how they pronounce it, I think. Anyways, the police department shows up at this haunted house. And are you familiar with the Ammon case?
No.
All right, the Ammons, I believe. Gary, Indiana, Father Michael Magino gets a phone call that there's a family in the ICU in the ER, I think it was. And they thought originally that the son, who was maybe 8 or 9 years old, had some psychological issues going on.
Mhm.
And that's what the doctors thought until they got into the room with him and he started walking up the wall
Whoa. Oh
backwards,
my god.
speaking in tongue or languages that he didn't know, flipped down onto the chair, looks at his grandma, starts laughing at her. And then like a pathogen, hitchhiker effect kind of bounced around through the children. And so the priest
Yep.
was called. And so Michael Magano goes there and then he goes, okay, we're going to go back to your house and do an investigation. He tries to perform an exorcism. Well, the police department, when they originally got to the house before they transferred the child to the hospital, the police department's there. And I think there's a documentary on it where the journalist is actively interviewing the police officer, and the officer's like, I've never seen anything like this, and I don't want to again. He said, because when he got there, there were voices coming from the cellar, right? Downstairs in the cellar with the lights off at night, and there are voices naming, calling the police officer by name, come with us, come down here.
Oh my God.
That's to kind of coordinate that. I have a good friend of mine in England who also uh, was told by whatever this species is to bow down and worship them in multiple voices, bow down and worship us. And then, in addition to that, very similar to the Ammon's case, come with us, come here, come with us.
Mm.
So, I don't believe that we can properly quantify who and what they are, but I can tell you this with a surety that they are grooming people for initiation among us. But it seems like the rest of us were just bugs.
Charles, Klaus Schwab, you'll eat
There we
bugs.
go.
You'll eat each other.
Absolutely. You'll own nothing and you'll like it. You know what I mean?
You got he stepped down recently, I guess.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with that. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Another looks like another ritual to me, in my opinion. Anyways,
Mhm.
fascinating conversation. I really wish we had more time. Would love to get into the details of like the actual sorcery and how they get us with all that, but maybe we just don't even need to know. Maybe that's enough curiosity.
We'll see
um,
how they handle this, and then next time we'll get into that.
right, right. Well, pleasure as always, Mr.
Thank you, brother.
Nathaniel Gillis. Where can people find you if they're looking for more of your work, more of your links, anything you have to offer?
Just go to my Instagram account if you want to follow just my social posts. I'm not on X anymore. X is now my ex. No, I'm just kidding, right? We're not together anymore, you know. It was me, it wasn't her. No, but yeah, what was I gonna say? So if you want to get more of my interviews, go on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel under
Yeah,
my name. I have a playlist of I think 150 interviews just on YouTube. But other than that, just yeah,
yeah.
thank you
Just
for having me on. It's always a good conversation, brother. Thank you.
appreciate you, the research you do. Uh, Obviously, take your time. Don't go too deep. Take your rest. We all need it. This is tough
Absolutely.
stuff, and not you don't always get the compensation you deserve for it. So we really appreciate you.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for having me on.
Again, yeah, wonderful. Thanks, guys. Like, subscribe if you guys enjoyed, and check out more of Mr. Nathaniel Gill's work. You guys take care. Bye. Oops.
You pressed delete.